So let us move ahead to lab 2, and in lab 2 let us start with a very small requirement for our customer project. So at this moment what is happening is in our customer project we are reading the CSV file and we are dumping that CSV file into our data warehouse, right? But now I want to put a small validation here. I want to say that if the customer amount is less than 0, these records should not be inserted into the database. I want these records to go into some error log file or bad records file or something, right? I don't want these records to be logged into my main table. So if you remember, our main table was this, right? So I don't want, that the data should be logged into this table. So first thing, let me go and clean this. So I'm going to go and just delete all the records at this moment, right? And I will go here and let me add some negative records. So you can see here for Rahul and Rohit, I'm going to go and add some negative records, or I'm going to go and add something 0, right? So I want to go and apply a validation saying that when this file gets loaded, I want to only put values which are greater than 0. So anything 0 and less than 0, right, are not allowed. They should go into an error log text file or into a bad record text file, right? So let us go back to our SSIS package. So let us go back to our SSIS package. So in order to achieve that, we have a very, very nice component here in our DTS, in our data flow task, I will say. In our data flow task, we have a nice thing here called as the conditional split, if conditions. So you can go and check that, okay, if the customer amount is equal to 0 or it is below 0, then don't allow to insert into the database. So now let us go ahead and let me go and delete this path from here. And here, let me go and put a conditional split. So let me put this component of conditional split here. And I will say, okay, output of the capital case component, I'm giving it to conditional split. And then I will say right click and edit. So once you click on edit, it actually opens up this conditional split transformation editor here. At the first glance, this editor will look very confusing, but don't worry. Let us go slow. Follow me what I'm doing. The first thing is look at this tab here of the columns. So expand that. So if you look at this tab, if you look at this this tab here, it actually opens up whichever are the fields which are coming from your CSV. So you can see here the customer code is coming from CSV, customer name, customer amount, sales date, and you can see that there is one more field here called as the U customer name. This U customer name field is actually coming from this capital case component, right? And don't worry too much about this variable and parameters at this moment. Leave it. We'll talk about this later on. The next thing what you'll find is, at the right hand side, you will find there are lots of functions here. Okay, you can find there are lots of functions like the string function, then we have some date and time function, etc. Okay, and operators, etc. So what we want to do now is, I want to say that, okay, if the customer name, right? So I'm going to say, okay, now there are two outputs which will come here. You can see at the down below, you can go and put multiple conditions here. So I'll say, okay, first is error 1, okay, error component, or I'll say error condition. So I'll say if the customer amount is less than, look at this, less than 0, right? Or, so again, go and search here for the or condition. So you can see there is a logical or. So I'll say or. Look at the way I'm dragging and dropping things. Okay, again a bracket start. So again I'll say customer amount. And in case you are good in writing things, you can just type out things here. But at this moment, I'm assuming that a lot of people are not programmers, right? So I'm going to go and say equal to. So just try to follow the functions at the top is equal to 0, right? So you can see now what I'm trying to do is, I'm saying here, if the customer amount is less than 0, or if the customer amount is equal to 0, then it's an error, right? But now look at things here. You can see that it is in a red color. So this red color indicates an error. it says that there is some error in the syntax here, right? Now first thing, there is no error in the syntax as such, but the error is in the data type of customer amount. You can do comparison of numeric values like greater than 0 or equal to 0 when this customer amount field is numeric. If it is not numeric, if it is a string, then this comparison is not possible. So you'd like to go and check, that, okay, so what is the data type of this customer amount, right? So let us go and close this. Now, in order to know the data type, we need to understand one concept here called as the connection manager. So you can see over here something called as connection managers. So what are these? What are these and how are they created actually? Now, whenever extraction, transformation and loading happens, especially when extraction and loading happens, they need connection managers. If you see extraction loads from some source. So the connection between the source and that extraction component is done via connection manager. In the same way, when you are loading back to a destination, that loading logic, right, needs a connection manager. So you can see here at this moment, we have two connection managers here. One is the CSV connection, which actually tells you, which is the path from where the CSV will be loaded. And then we have this SQL Server connection manager, which actually tells you the SQL Server RDBMS details, right? Now, when these connection managers actually connect to your source or to your destination, they define the data type automatically. You can see here in the CSV connection, we have an advanced tab. Again, I'll tell you how I went here. You need to go on this connection manager of CSV connection, double click on it, and this pops up. So if you go to the advanced here, you can see that by default, the data type of all the fields he has taken as DT_STR. So in the same way, if you see the customer amount here is also taken as DT_STR. So DT stands for data transformation and STR means, a string. Now you must be wondering that why is he taking it as string? Why didn't he take this as a numeric data type? Remember, when data is loaded in CSV files, they are simple text. If you look at CSV file, I can go and put anything what I wish here, right? So CSV file is a free text file. So that's why by default, your SSIS package thinks, that any kind of column which is coming from CSV is always a string, right? So in the same way, even though the data of the customer amount is string, a numeric, he has still taken it as string, right? So that means when this data is read from here, he is reading it as string, and because he is reading it as string, that's why when you go to the conditional split here and when you try to go and put a numeric comparison, so when you go and try to do something like this, greater than 0, he's not able to do it. He says that not possible, right? So if you try to do a OK here, you should land up into some error, and you can, if you see this error very, very closely, it says that the data types DT_WSTR or STR are incompatible for these kind of operators. For greater than sign and less than sign, DT_STR is a very inappropriate data type. So in other words, now we need to go and convert this, we need to go and do some kind of a data conversion, right? So that we can do the numeric comparison. And that's where we have one more component here called as data conversion. So let us go ahead and delete this thing from here. And let me go and put a data conversion component. So I'll say, and always put proper text names, because at one moment of time, you will not know what this component is doing, right? So like do a one slight select, right? Don't do a double click, just do one click select. And then you can go and start typing here. So I'll say this is customer amount conversion, right? So I know that yes, he's going to go and convert this customer amount into a numeric, right? So again, I'll do an edit. So I'll say here, I'm interested to go and change this customer amount, or I want to convert this customer amount into, so basically I want to go and convert this customer amount into a money. Now remember that in our SQL server at this moment, very quickly, the data type of our TBL customer, the customer amount. So let us go and quickly see the data type. So if you see the data type, it is a money, right? So over here, the appropriate mapping data type, remember SSIS has its own set of data types. So for example, over here, if we have varchar or nvarchar, for that we have here something called as dt_str. If we have here something called as money, then we have here something called as dt_currency. So there is a mapping between SSIS data type and SQL Server data type. I will talk about more of these mappings, how they work, in the other part of the video. But at this moment, because this customer amount is a money, so what we need to do is we need to go and apply dt_currency. So there it is, currency, dt_cy. Okay. Now he gives you two options. He says that, do you want to go and create a new copy of a customer, or do you want to go and apply on the same one? So I'll say yes, I want to go and create a new copy of a customer here. So I'll say this is customer amount currency. Okay, so this is basically, I've just given a column name so that I can differentiate that the first customer amount is actually a string, and this customer amount CY will be actually currency, right? And then I will go and give the input of this to the conditional split. And now let's go and do a right click, edit. So now I shouldn't be getting those red errors. So you can see, first thing, we have this customer amount, which is a string data type, and you can see we have the customer amount CY, which we just added, is the currency data type. So I'll say here, one output is the error. So when do we have an error? We have an error when this customer amount is less than 0, or, now in case you know the signs, you can just type it out. In case you don't know the signs, you can always go and start using this helps around. So you can say like operator and search for or. So must be, you can start using this UI here. So I'll say or customer amount CY. Look at the way I'm dragging and dropping. If it is equal to 0. So if it is less than 0, or if it is equal to 0, then it is an error, or else everything is fine. You can see now, I don't see that red sign, which indicates that this condition is properly working, right? And if you remember in the previous situation, this was showing us a red sign, right? So I'll just do OK, and that's it. And now I will go and drag and drop the output to this customer data warehouse. Now the first thing he says is that, so what output do you want to drag and drop to this customer data warehouse? Do you want to drag and drop that error, or do you want to go and drag and drop the conditional default output? Now remember, if you see over here, I just put one condition called as error. What it means is that everything other than this condition is a proper thing, right? So that's why if you see now, when I go and drag and drop this output here, so when I go and drag and drop this output here, so he says that, okay, so what do you want to drag and drop here? The error or other than the error condition? So I'll say yes, the default output, which is nothing but my proper output, I want to go and drag and drop here, and there it is. And now what I would like to do is, I would like to go and create an error destination text file, right? So I would like to say that, okay, give this error output, okay? So I'm going to go and drag and drop to the flat file destination. So you can see here the error output is now going to the flat file destination, right? So I'll go and say edit, and I will say new, create a new connection file connection manager, and I'll give this name as error connection manager. So let me go and browse here, and let me create a text file here. So I'm going to go and create a text file here saying this is a error text file, right? Error text file. So whatever are errors, which will actually come to this file here. And yes, I want all the columns and everything, so that is fine. And I'll just say okay. And let me check the mappings. Yes, my mappings are fine. I'll just say okay, right? And Control S, right? So if you see here now, the first thing is he will read from the CSV file. He will do the capitalization. After that, this component here converts from a string to a numeric. Then I can do the conditional comparison. So if it is greater than 0, all the values come to the customer data warehouse. In case it is equal to 0 or less than that, those all come to this error file here, right? So again, always put proper text, error destination, right? And now remember, in our text file, if you remember, at this moment, these two records should not go into the database. So these two records should not be going to this path. It should be going to the error path, right? So let me go and run this. So I'm going to go and run this here. And there we have an error, right? So again, I'm not going to remove the errors. In case I get an error, I'm going to go and record that error so that in case you get that error, you should be able to remove it, right? So this error is again about that 64-bit and 32-bit. So right click, go to the properties, go to your debugging tab and say runtime 64-bit is false, right? So that's because of the 32-bit and 64-bit issue. Now let me go back and run again. So there it is running. So 2 records are going to go so very quickly. So 2 records, we are expecting it to go into the error file, right? There you can see 2 records into the error file, and 6 records should go into the database, right? So if I go back to my database here, so let us go back to our database. Let us do a select here. Select star. So there it is, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 1006 and 1007 are not loaded, right? And those are actually loaded into that text file. So if you go to the error file now very quickly, so let me go to my C drive. So in this, if I go to the error file, you can see that those errors are now sent to the error file, right? So you can see by using the conditional split, how we are able to put validations, and how we are able to ensure that proper data goes into the proper source. So great. So we are able to read from the CSV file. We are able to do capitalization. We are able to do the data conversion. We are able to check, if the value is 0 and it is less than 0, that means if it is negative, we should not put that value into the database. So everything is good, but errors happen, bad things happen, right? For example, now in this case, assume that in the customer amount you start getting non-numeric values. For example, here somebody says 100 for some reason, the text file which comes, it has some non-numeric values in a column which is numeric. For example, at this moment, the customer amount is a currency data type, right? And we have a non-numeric value here. So what will happen in this case? In this case, definitely the application will crash, because in our database, if you remember, the data type of currency amount is, very quickly, just to show you once again, the data type of customer amount, is money, right? So definitely, over here things will crash. So if I run this program, so now when the application runs, you can see that there is an error here, right? And if you watch very closely, the error is happening when he's trying to convert the customer amount, right? So when he's trying to convert that customer amount into a currency data type, the error is happening, and that's obvious, because at this moment the data type is currency, and he's trying to convert this 100 word into a currency, into a numeric, right? And if you go on the progress bar just to see that what the error is, and if you remember how to see that error, see for the first red sign here, and you can see here data conversion failed while converting customer amount to customer amount currency, right? And he's also stating that basically on which column the data has on which column the data conversion failed, right? So how do we fix this? So in case if we have such kind of an error, we again would like to handle these errors, right? So to handle errors, so let me go and stop this debugging here. So let me go and stop debugging. Now, if you remember in the first video, the first 1 hour of the video, we said that every component has two outputs. So one output, which is with this sign, with this blue color arrow, and the other output with this red color arrow. Now the output with the blue color arrow is where the data comes in. So when there are no errors, everything is fine, everything is good, then the data comes via this blue arrow, right? But when there are errors, the error data is sent into this red arrow here. And now at this moment, the error is happening while we do the conversion of the customer amount. So definitely we need to do the error handling over here. So we need to use this red arrow here to do the error handling, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back here, and I will go and pick up a error file. So I'm going to go and create an error file. So let us go to the toolbox. So let me go to the SSIS toolbox here, SSIS toolbox, and let's take a error destination file. So I'm going to go and take a flat file destination. Now, before we move ahead very quickly, before I go and connect these errors with the error file destination, I would like to point out a very important thing here. By default, when an error happens, SSIS application stops right there. So if you remember, when we ran the application, right, just a minute ago, when the error happened during the customer amount conversion, so you can see now he is reading from the CSV file. Afterwards, the capitalization happens. Once the error happens, there was no movement further. Application stopped right there, right? So in other words, by default, the behavior is that the application fails and stops right there. Now, how can we see this behavior, or I'll say rather, how can we change this behavior? Because at this moment, what we want to do is we don't want the application to stop. What we want is we want the application should send, whatever are the errors, from this red sign, probably to this flat file destination, right? So to see this behavior, right click on this, say edit, and so the data conversion transformation editor opens, and just down below you can see that there is a nice button here saying configure error output. So let us click on this. Now in this configure error output, you can see by default it says that when the error happens, this component will fail. But now there are more three options here. I'll say more two options rather. One is yes, fail component. So in case when the error happens, by default you will fail the component. The second one is ignore failure. So sometimes you feel that okay, even if there is a failure, just ignore and keep continuing with the next rows. And the third one is redirect row. So this redirect row is what we want. So in other words, when the error happens, we want that error row to be redirected to that red arrow output, right? So I can go and select this redirect row over here. Now you can also see that there are two things actually. One is there is an error, and then there are truncations. So sometimes, truncations means what? For example, if there is 4 character and you are trying to push 10 characters, then the 6 characters will be removed or truncated, right? Now a lot of times, some of the application treat, or some of the situation in application treat truncation as an error. or some of the application don't treat it as an error. So you can see, they have given a separate box here saying that, so what do you want to do while doing truncation? Do you want to ignore it, or do you want to fail the component, right? So one is there are errors like data conversion. The other one is, because of the size mismatch, there is a truncation. So again, for truncation, they have given all the three options of what you want to do. You can see down below, there is a small box here saying apply, and again those three options. So this box is given why? Because let us say that you have lots of columns here. So what you can do is you can select all. So you can just go and say, okay, select all this and say apply to all of these cells, redirect row, right? So this drop down what you see here is there, when you have multiple rows and lots of columns and you want to go and apply to all of them some common thing, right? You can do that. So at this moment, yes, even if there is an error, I want to redirect the row. Even if there is a truncation, I want to redirect. I'll say apply, I'll say okay, and I will say okay here, right? Now once I say apply, you can see that there is a small warning here which says that rows which are sent to the error output will be lost. In other words, he says that you said that all the errors what happens will go to that red arrow here, but you are not defined what you want to do with the error output. So the rows will be lost. So he is suggesting you to ensure that this red arrow is connected to something. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and take this red arrow and connect to this file destination here, right? So I will say yes, redirect the row, and I will say apply, yes, and I'll say okay, right? So any kind of data conversion errors will now be redirected to this flat file destination. So here I will say conversion error rows, right? So in this, let me go here and click edit. So I'll say new, and I will say delimited, and I'll say this is conversion error file connection manager, right? So I'll just say browse here, and I will say one is the error and the other one is this file will contain error due to conversion, right? Error conversion, okay, and error conversion, and I will say open. I would like to take all the columns what I have here, so yes, everything, and I'll say okay, and I will say yes, take all the files, take all the columns, and I'll say okay, right? So now this is how the flow of our application is at this moment. So we read from the CSV file, the capitalization is done. Afterwards, the customer amount is data converted, and in case that data conversion fails, that data conversion will be written to this error file over here. And after that, there is a conditional split, and in the conditional split, again, if the values are equal to 0 or less than 0, then they again go back to the error file. Now remember that this error and this error have a big difference. I'm sure that you have understood the difference between both of these errors. This is more of a technical error, error which happens while data conversion, file not found, and those kind of things. This is more validation error, business errors, or I'll say business validations. We should not use that word error. It's more a business validation. So this red sign should not be confused with this if condition here at this moment, right? So let us go and see our file. So the following thing should happen now. The first row should go over here to this data conversion error. All the other rows should go to the customer data warehouse, leaving these two rows. These two rows should go to this error here. So over here I expect 2 rows, here I expect 1 row, and all the remaining rows will go to this default thing here, right? So let me go and run this. Let us see what happens. So there our application is starting. So files are getting read, and there it is. So you can see first thing, let me zoom here and let us see what do we see here, right? So one row to the error, that is right. Two rows which are having those business validation issues, and the remaining 5 rows have gone to the actual table, right? So if I go now to my folder just to check, so let us go to our folder here. So in the error conversion text file, you can see that Shiv 100 has come here. In the error, we have those two things, right? Two records, right? And in our SQL server, very quickly, we should see the remaining 5 records. So you can see now how things are happening, right? So there it is. This will give you a good picture, right? So you can see these are business validation errors, these are technical errors, and this is our actual data. So this brings us to the end of lab 2, and this lab 2 we covered 3 important things. So the first thing is we covered the if condition, the conditional split. Second one, we covered data conversion. And the third one, we covered how to handle technical errors like data conversion, file not found, and so on, right? Now, if you look at, we have completed approximately 1.5 hours of the training. And in this 1.5 hours, can you believe you are able to do the complete extraction, transformation, and loading process? You are able to handle errors. You are able to apply business validations. You are able to do data conversion. So we can see that within this 1.5 hours, we have completed so many things. So basically, when you start learning from the project perspective, from actual project perspective, the learning actually becomes much faster, right? So I hope that you like this lab 2, and after lab 2, I'm going to have small questionnaire session. So please go and read that questions and try to answer it yourself. Do not take any kind of help. And in case you are able to answer them, that means that you are doing very good. This is my appeal, or I'll say this is my request, I'll say rather, not appeal, a request, that if you really like what we are doing here at QuestPond, please go to facebook.com/QuestPond and say that yes, you have completed lab 1, you have completed lab 2. With that, we come to know that how many people are actually watching this video series, and the more you watch that video series, the more we record about it, right? So if you want to really keep encouraging us for a video series, we would like to see participation, saying that yes, I completed lab 2 and I'm waiting for lab 3, or if there are any issues around the lab, please do also write about it. In case there are some technical question, please go and write about the same as well. So please go to facebook.com/QuestPond and please give your inputs. Thank you so much.